Hey everyone, I'm very excited about this next episode. There are so many incredible insights and tips you're going to learn that you'll be able to apply to your journey right away. It's with the co founder of an incredible company called Brighthire, and our guest today is its CEO, Ben. What's interesting about Brighthire, and I believe there will be a huge company very, very soon, are a few things. So, the first thing is that stands out is the roster of investors, right? They have Jeff Weiner, the former CEO of LinkedIn, Adam Grant as an advisor and investor. They have Index Ventures, Flybridge Capital, Ground Up Ventures, all Class A investors. The second thing is they are disrupting the hiring space by providing real data to the interviewing and hiring process. So there's no more, pens and paper. There's no more going back and forth. What did he say? What did she say? Real hard data. Now, what can you expect to walk out with from listening to this episode? So the first thing is the founding story of Brighthire. It's an incredible story. The second thing is tips to change up your hiring process. Where Ben is going to go into what he does at the company and how could you apply that to your company too. The third thing is what it takes to create a company. Ben is a first-time founder of an incredible SaaS technology platform, and he's going to talk about his early days, what were the steps he took after he actually had the idea. Now, the fourth thing is the company did not start off remote, and they had to go remote with the whole entire pandemic. So Ben is going to talk about what they did to go remote. Now, Ben was amazing, and I want to thank him. This was his first podcast recording, and he did a really, really good job. So there's no doubt if you're listening or watching to this episode, you're going to listen or watch one time, twice, or three times. You're going to learn so many incredible things to implement into your journey today. Now have a great listen, and if you enjoyed, please share it with a friend that you think will be able to benefit from it too. And the last thing, please, don't forget to subscribe. Hey everyone, I'm super, super excited today to have with us our next guest for Founder Stories. Today we have the absolute honor to have with us the founder and CEO of a company that I truly believe is going to be a billion-dollar company within the next few years. Not even a question. This company is called Brighthire, and it's a company that raised $15.5 million to date from investors like NextPlay, Flybridge. Jeff Weiner, the CEO of LinkedIn, has Adam Grant as an advisor. But today we have the honor to have the CEO, Ben, with us today to share with us the story of how he came to create Brighthire, his story before Brighthire, what his childhood was like, and how he is this awesome, awesome dad and brother and CEO who he is today. So Ben, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you. So Ben, before you obviously came to Brighthire, you founded the CEO of a phenomenal company, and just you look at the raves or reviews, and you look at what people are saying about it. You look at your list of investors. You look at, I'm assuming I haven't looked at the financial data yet, but your customers that you're acquiring, which is absolutely phenomenal. Which you're on, obviously I don't know the inner workings, but the trajectory that you have looks amazing. But let's start off, before Brighthire. All the way before Brighthire, before everything else you did, where are you from and what was your upbringing like?
Yeah. So I grew up in northern New Jersey, Montclair, New Jersey, just outside New York City, which is a great town. It was a really fun place to grow up because it's near New York City. You could go in and you could kind of experience what that was like, but Montclair had a culture of its own. Historically it was a pretty diverse town, so got to grow up with people from lots of different walks of life and make lots of different types of friends. And so it was a good perspective to have growing up. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful place to live. I actually live there now. I moved back. And interestingly, I grew up there with my co-founder. We've known each other since we were pretty young. And he lives there too. So we live about 10 minutes from each other. And it's a wonderful place. And yeah, grew up with two. Sorry, the dog is barking in the background. Real life. It's a great place to grow up, and yeah, grew up with two amazing parents that wonderful family, and twin sister and older brother. So yeah, I'm very, very lucky.
Wow, it's beautiful. So do you recall any pivotal moments from your childhood that made a difference in your life going forward?
I don't know. I don't know. I haven't really sat around thinking about pivotal moments from my childhood, but I think, like, being lucky enough to grow up, you sort of win the life lottery if you're saying, when you grow up and you have, food to eat and great parents and, caring family and, you're in a nice place with, nice town. Like, I think that's probably pivotal moment. Number one is just kind of like living, winning the sort of the life lottery in that regard, because that puts you in a very, privileged position to chase after dreams and do things that, a lot of people don't necessarily get the opportunity to do. So you got to kind of appreciate that, because, you have to kind of acknowledge that you're given a bunch of advantages that not a lot of people in the world have. So, yeah, let's start there.
That's so true, especially now where like, mental health and like the word trauma and everything about trauma, which is coming at the forefront these days of like everyone's mind. It's like something that everyone's talking about. It's something that the past, the 21st century, which is, things that we're constantly focusing on, the previous generation didn't focus on. And for us to recognize that, like the fact that, thank God we don't, obviously everyone has trauma, everyone has mental health, but like to recognize like how blessed we are to grow up like that, and then eventually to pass that on to our children too. It's such to be grateful like that is amazing, absolutely amazing.
Yes, it's just important to recognize if you've actually started, the game on first or second or third base. Just it's not, it's not negative. It's positive, but you should be kind of thankful and recognize that and recognize that not everyone has that opportunity, and so you gotta, at least I personally think that you should go out of your way to kind of lend a hand and help other people get into the same position. That's kind of your responsibility.
For sure. I'm assuming, we'll get into it shortly, but like how your own personal values tie into you founding a company and the company specifically that you founded. I'm sure has a big part of it. But before that, I want to get into what are you specifically grateful for today? Like 3 things you're grateful for.
Health, family, and the opportunity to work on something. You spend a lot of time at work, or a lot of people spend a lot of time at work, and so the opportunity to work on something that I'm personally passionate about, that I enjoy, that feels kind of meaningful. I mean, those are 3 big ones right off the bat.
Right. Amazing, absolutely amazing, and it's like the most important things in life. It's like you think about the pillars of life. There's obviously family, family relationships. Obviously, health is the second thing, and then obviously work, being able to do something meaningful. So tell me about like this. You weren't an entrepreneur. You had, I mean, from our previous conversation, you had 2 previous startups. One that unfortunately had to shut down, and we'll get into that emotions about shutting down a startup, which is it's a big learning curve. But also you had another startup before. But you're interested in entrepreneurship. When did it come about and everything?
Yeah, I would say there's a difference between being interested in entrepreneurship and being interested in technology. They're not, they're not one and the same. You can be an entrepreneur and not work in technology. So, I was pretty trying to be pretty entrepreneurial, pretty young. I had a neighbor who I'm still very close friends with, one of my best friends in the world, and he lived 2 houses down. And we would, I mean, have schemes on schemes. We had this one thing, we were like building I don't know where this came from. We were building bird houses out of like natural, like wood and mud. We were like, these are going to be amazing. We'll sell them to the art museum, and then we had another scheme. I don't know, we were probably 8 years old, maybe 9. And we were like taking stuff out of our attics, like our parents, heirlooms. And we didn't really ask permission. We put them in a wagon and we were literally pulling them door to door in the neighborhood, like knocking on people's doors, being like, you want to buy any of this stuff? And God knows what we were selling, like family heirlooms and things of that nature. To like, I grew up, there's a public pool kind of across the street from my house. So, which was pretty lucky, because in the summer, there's just cars up and down the street, hundreds of people. And so it was like very high traffic area. So we would, obviously do like the lemonade stand thing. We would sell candy. Then there was like the ice cream truck, which would park in front of the house a lot, because there was ice cream truck with service in the pool. And we would sort of like build these relationships with the ice cream truck guy, where we would send his stuff his way, and then he would send people back our way. So I was always like pretty interested in entrepreneurship, just not necessarily technology. That just wasn't something that, anyone in my family worked around, or wasn't necessarily at the front of my mind until much later, into my working life.
And tell me about that interest in technology. But I love the fact all those types of things. You were everything from those 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Everything. You're a real on. You were that kid that. Were you the trouble kid in the neighborhood, or were you just a hustler in the neighborhood? You and your friend.
I wouldn't say I wasn't the trouble kid. Yeah, we weren't the trouble kids, but we weren't weren't the best, but we weren't trouble. Somewhere in the middle. It was all very innocent. It was like, this is a good way to make money. I mean, same thing. We would shovel driveways together, and then we both got snow blowers. And then one of our not a scheme, but we would go these huge driveways. There's one of the streets in my town. Some of these houses are really big, and they have these massive driveways. I mean, like 50, 100-yard driveways. And so we'd go up and knock on their door with like, 2 young kids with shovels and be like, can we shovel your driveway? And they'd be like, sure. It's a huge driveway. what do we need to pay you? We'd be like, I don't know, 200, $250. And they'd be like, sure. I mean, this is going to take you all night. And then we would like walk to the end of the driveway, pull out our snow blowers in like 10 minutes and be like, thank you. You know, like you didn't say you cared how we did it. So I don't know, just, you know, like trying to find ways to make money and yeah, I just thought it was fun. But yeah, the technology was much later. I was in a corporate development role, just like, you know, M&A, partnerships, and some product strategy at a company that was not really, it wasn't a tech company. It was a research advisory firm. Very, you know, the original business model was basically writing research reports and then hosting like executive forums. But they had this amazing intellectual property. They'd done all this very interesting research about best practices across, you know, a spectrum of functional areas and you know, mostly focused on large enterprises. And a lot of the work that I was doing when I was there was strategy work related to how do we sort of transition this business model or extend our business from, you know, the traditional side of it that we've had for 15, 20 years to being more, you know, data oriented or technology oriented. So whether it was something as simple as, you know, benchmark, you know, doing these massive employee engagement surveys across, you know, General Electric, you know, and then what do we do with that data, to things that were even more technology forward. So that was kind of the entree into technology. We're starting to look at companies that might be interesting partners or acquisitions that were doing things related to the problems that we were solving, but in a software forward or data forward way. Yeah.
Yeah. So then talk to me about the decision to go ahead. You know, you're working at these corporate jobs. You know, your life is good, absolutely good. You have your 401k probably set. You know, you have your company that, you know, investing in it and everything else. You have health insurance. You have everything going good for you. Why even get the thought process of like, let me go ahead and like, you know, let me maybe explore a different career path. Let me explore the option of creating a startup.
That's a good question. I mean, just to set the context, you know, as you know, I wasn't making like, you know, I wasn't like an investment banker out of college. It was not one of those deals. It was a great company, and they attracted incredibly smart people. And because they attracted smart people, because it was a great company, because the culture was great, they had these amazingly talented, you know, people that I don't know if I would count myself among them, but, you know, my colleagues were really smart and amazing. But it didn't pay, like, you know, it wasn't like working at some top tier consulting firm or investment bank. So, and I was also not that
Oh, it
old.
wasn't $1 million. It was $250,000. Still not bad.
Yeah, right. Like, let's say like a fifth of that actually. So, you know, I was not on easy street per se, you know, not like hard up obviously, but it wasn't, you know, some high paying, you know, job. And I was also not that old, you know, so I didn't have a lot of responsibilities. So the idea of like risk and leaving a cushy job, it was neither like that cushy of a job, nor was there anything that I was putting at risk by doing something else at the time. And really I went back to, I didn't go straight into just pure entrepreneurship. I left, I went to grad school, I got my MBA, but while I was getting my MBA, I effectively spent the entire time there just focused on trying to start a company. I was just sort of like singularly focused on, I want to build a business, you know, from the ground up, and always had lots of ideas and, you know, was always thinking about what to work on. So that was kind of how I got into building a startup. And so the first version of that was, I was in school. So I was like doing it kind of full time while I was in school, but, you know, it wasn't like I'm falling back on nothing. And so I don't want to make it out to see some like kind of hero's journey. You know, that was kind of the first step. Doing this startup was a different proposition later in life, and kind of more of an opportunity cost.
So then tell me about, like, you know, entrepreneurship is not just, and I'm assuming it's not just like entrepreneurship is a career in itself, right? And if you look at most entrepreneurs, they go ahead and found multiple different companies, and it could be in the same space, it could be in different types of spaces, but like entrepreneurship for itself is a career that entrepreneurs like do. So my career, for example, someone's career is just entrepreneurship, which I'll start one company, if it fails, I start another, and if it fails, or success, and like the whole entire thing. But I want to know about, like, you know, that conversation with your wife. You know, a lot of times, you know, we don't talk as entrepreneurs, we don't talk about this aspect of, like, you know, everyone has, you know, if someone is in a relationship at that point of time, being an entrepreneur doesn't just affect you, it affects them too, right? From emotional standpoint, everything. So like you're in school. You decide you want, you leave your job and decide you're going to go get your MBA. Okay, forget about the student loans over there, right? Which is, I don't even, a whole nother separate thing.
We
Afterwards,
have a long conversation. We could have a long conversation about whether I would advise that choice. Yeah.
but like after you graduate, you tell your wife, listen, honey, I know like I'm X amount of money in student loans, but I'm not going to go the safe path. I'm going to go the other path, which is I'm going to go try this risky journey, which can end up paying up much more, and it's the most gratifying journey possible. But I'm going to go this risky journey of launching a startup, and not being able to essentially, I'm assuming you have savings, but like more of a difficult path. What's the conversation like?
So I'll tell you so my actual kind of path was doing this startup when I was in grad school, and then a little bit after grad school for probably 6 or 12, I'd say 12 months, maybe a little longer. So I was doing it for about 2.5, 3 years. And it was actually in the career space as well, but a different, a completely different business for what we're building today. Then when I realized that wasn't necessarily going to take off, or, I wasn't able to really make it work. I was consulting back at the company I worked with prior to going to grad school to kind of make ends meet while I played with, other opportunities. Actually, one was in the media space. And then eventually, and we could talk about why I kind of decided to abandon that. I was like, I need to join a team. And I was already very, very like enmeshed in technology, specifically in New York. I spent, 3 years, 2010 to 2013, as like the New York technology scene was pretty nascent, but then kind of starting to form a little bit, just being in that world and meeting lots of entrepreneurs and investors. I just realized that I needed to join an actual technology company. I still had not worked for a software company, a technology company. So then I worked for a company in the software space, in the marketing technology company, for about 2.5 years. Then I joined another company in the analytics space that was much earlier stage, to kind of lead operations, finance, and a bunch of other stuff. And I was there for over 4 years. Then I left to start this company. So the conversation with my wife was actually leaving my last company, and then, sort of what am I going to do next? And it was, I could join another startup, I could join a growth stage technology company, I could join a large technology company, or I could start my own company. And that was the conversation. It was sort of, hey, I think I'm going to start something versus do one of those other paths. And it was, I worked directly with 2 founders for almost 7 years right before starting this company. So I was under no illusions about what that lifestyle was like, or what, the journey was for them. Very, front row seat to a lot of stress and a lot of hours and a lot of ups and downs, and experiencing them to myself to a good degree. And so it was a very honest conversation of like, this is going to be really hard. I'm going to be working a lot. There's going to be a lot of ups and downs. There's like a version of the movie where it's a spectacular outcome, and there's a whole bunch of versions of the movie where it like flops in the theater. And, is that something that you'd be comfortable with? It was just an honest conversation, and thankfully my wife was like, I support you with whatever you think is best and you want to do. But it's definitely a trade-off. It's a trade-off for her, for sure. The hours are very long. So
Yeah, for sure. And wow, it's amazing the fact, like, obviously everyone should be blessed like you to have a supportive spouse, but to have that type of thing is so necessary, because a lot of times we forget how much, having that, being in a relationship, how much impacts your startup journey to a certain degree. Knowing you have a support network to come to, knowing there's someone to support you, to be there for you, and having, which is so important, especially if you have kids and everything. It makes a whole entire difference to the whole entire journey and everything. Like, even you're married to 2 beautiful children. How does that impact being a founder, being a CEO, and the decisions you make, and running a startup and everything?
I mean, in many ways, just because you have kids doesn't mean there's less to do. So that's part of it. It's sort of figuring out how do you make these things all fit together. My co-founder has children as well, and so we just kind of have to fit our work around the responsibilities that we have. So that means, I have to put my kid to bed every night. I have to feed him dinner. I want to see him in the morning. So we're kind of going on and offline at weird hours, because we still got to get the same amount of stuff done, but we're not, it's not like our life is, it's just our life. It's other people's lives. And so we need to, make time for that stuff because it's really important, and then fit our work around it. So that's one piece. It shapes obviously the culture we build. We want to be able to accommodate other people like us.
Right.
Right. I don't want to build a culture where you can only work at this startup if you have no responsibilities and it's, 24/7. Obviously we have to move fast. That's the name of the game. And we have to work hard to move fast. But, we also want to be able to have people work with us who have other responsibilities. That might not be kids, that might be other things. But if we can do it and it's important to us, we should create an environment where that's the case for other people as well. And that extends from like hours to benefits to, all the things that you would provide along those lines. So I'd say that's the biggest one, but there's definitely still trade-offs. I wasn't working as a startup founder, I'd spend more time with my kids. But working remotely is a blessing in that regard. I personally, it's been very beneficial for myself. My co-founder, I think, feels the same way, because even if you're working a lot, just even being able around your family is still helpful, and gives you energy and all that.
Right. Wow. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. And I mean, there's so many ways to take this conversation right now, because we touched upon so many incredible things. Obviously leading with empathy, everything from remote work, starting a company during this time, and having a remote work culture, and how do you build that up. But before we get to that, let's take a step back, and let's talk about the idea of how Breithauer came about. I know obviously you and your co-founder were together in kindergarten, so you probably spoke about in kindergarten that you want to start this company together. But let's talk about previously how this idea came about, how you approach starting the company, like founding, finding the product market fit in the beginning, and that part, and then we'll take it from there. Where I want to hear about how'd you convince your first angel investor to give you that however much money it was, if you remember, and we'll take it from there.
I should know who my first angel investor is, but I'm thinking who was the first person? The idea for Brighthire. Yeah, no, that's a different story, but I was not taking my parents' money. I was like, if this works out, you'll be in good shape. And if it doesn't, I don't want to, I don't want to. I know that's there's enough of a burden already on starting a company. I don't want it to be your money too. No matter how little it is. The idea for Brighthire came from a combination of things. I wanted to go back and do something at the earlier stage. My last company had gotten to a certain scale, so I was thinking about what to do next. I was pretty sure I wanted to go back to an earlier stage. I really love that environment. I love the act of building companies, and from a variety of perspectives, the product market fit journey, the early hires, setting the tone for the kind of organization you build, all of it. And I was actually on paternity leave and kind of hanging out with my older son when he was a baby, and thinking about what areas I was really interested in, what I was passionate about, because one of my lessons learned from an earlier entrepreneurial venture was that if you are not really passionate about the problem space that you are working in, it's pretty hard, because there's a lot of ups and downs, and you can't be lots of ups and downs and then also you don't care about the problem you're solving. So I was just sort of thinking about that, and one of the things that I realized was that of all the things that I'd gotten a chance to work on and we'd accomplished as an organization in my last company, the thing that I was most passionate about, the thing that stuck with me the most, was sort of the hiring and building this great team and seeing people grow in their careers. And then, just kind of thinking about that further, and just how central people are to, I mean, they're the main ingredient for the future success of every company, full stop.
Yeah.
And the way you build that team is hiring, right? And then just thinking about that process, and how we nearly didn't hire some of the best people we hired. It's a whisker away from not hiring them. Not for any great reason, to be honest, for some subjective reasons. And, we probably missed on a bunch of people that were great and we didn't hire. And, having had the opportunity to wear leadership hats in other functional areas like finance and sales and so forth, you just see how those parts of the organization run, the level of data, rigor, structure, collaboration that go into continuously refining them and becoming excellent because they're so important. And there's a huge gap between that and, those functional areas and those processes and the way they work and hiring. Mm-hmm. And there's a couple of reasons why. And I'd seen a lot of HR technology, in my first role at school. I was primarily focused on human capital space, looking at software companies. There's a little bit, V1 HR tech. I was sort of like, just put software in the cloud. Mm-hmm. But I'd always paid attention to that space because of that experience. And then, as the person holding the purse strings, my last company, you're sort of, you see all the technology because you have to say yes or no to whether or not we're bringing it on. There's a lot in the recruiting and hiring space that I'd seen. And, 99% of it was to find people, find a needle in the haystack, get an engineer to respond to an in-mail and, enter your funnel. But there was really no technology to solve the meat of the problem or the meat of the process to help us actually select the best people, do it really consistently, do it fairly, and so on and so forth. And that as a leader, the whole process is like a black box. You just really have no idea. Are we good at this? Are we bad at this? Who's doing a great job? Who's not? Are we selling well? And the only glimpse you have of it is, and I actually had this somewhat frequently, was I would sit in a lot of conversations with candidates to explain their equity as the CFO. And I would hear how we pitch the company and you just see these opportunities to do better. And it just struck me kind of crazy that the future of our success rides on this process that's basically pen and paper notes, feelings, memories, gut, and games of telephone. And so, to make a long story short, I just took that idea, so one of those, don't you think that's crazy, notions, to my co-founder Teddy, who, I brought him the idea because I talked to him all the time, but also he spent, a huge amount of time in this world. His parents were both in HR for 30 years. So we grew up with this stuff around the dinner table. He worked at CEB, which is a research advisory firm that I also worked at, in the HR research practice, and then spent 6.5 years at LinkedIn. So he's very well versed in this area, and the problem resonated for him. And he'd, at the same time, he was on the commercial side of LinkedIn, go-to-market team, in a couple different roles. And he'd seen how technology had really transformed how sales teams could work, and how data could be captured from the sales process such that, an enterprise sales team could really understand what's working, what's not working, and drive continuous excellence in a world where they used to just rely on, anecdotes and, hey, why can't we close this new product we launched? Or why is that person doing great and this person's struggling? It's been, made much more data driven and visible. And so we saw an opportunity to take the same technology and apply it back to the hiring space, which is actually quite common. There's also a lot of examples of technology that's created in the sales and marketing realm, that, 4 or 5 years later migrates over to hiring. And we just, it became hard to envision a future where people are still the most important ingredient for every organization, full stop. Hiring is the process by which you build that team. The rest of the organization is becoming enabled and powered in intelligent ways by data and technology, but then hiring is still running on feelings, memories, gut, pen and paper notes. That just felt like, A, hard to envision, and B, not a future that we thought was, should exist. And so we just felt like we couldn't pass up the opportunity to run at the problem.
Wow. I mean, I am so in line with you with every single problem you mentioned, and unfortunately, I think we're miles away from actually fixing the problem. I think we have companies like Brighthire that are trying to address it. You are essentially, I'm assuming most people that are going to be listening to this are familiar with the company Gong. You guys are the Gong for hiring, right? But talk to me about, that's amazing. You come about the problem, you decide you're going to launch this company together. You both quit your jobs, and then you're like, okay, let's start. And both you obviously, you dabbled a little bit in entrepreneurship. You worked closely with the founders. Teddy came from more of like, the steady trajectory of, working at, the research firm and then at LinkedIn. What was your first step? Did you guys go right away raise money? You try to raise the money? Did you guys, take the typical napkin store, start drawing it out, and you're finding, outsourcing to find the developers to build it up? What was your first step that you did once you decided to take that plunge?
Yeah, I mean, the first step was convincing Teddy that, he was in a much more, comfortable, he was on a great trajectory at LinkedIn and really loved the company and really loved his team and all of that. So, it had to be something really, compelling for him to even consider doing something new. Teddy and I actually did work together previously on an entrepreneurial venture, actually like a nights and weekends thing when we were both at a job at CEB, where we were kind of helping two people essentially build a business case and a business plan to raise private capital to go acquire a bunch of assets in the media space. Like kind of the details of what that was isn't important, but we were just spending nights and weekends together cranking on a business basically. So I'd actually worked with Teddy in that capacity before. So it wasn't like, this is somebody I'm very close with and what's it going to be like to work with them. We actually already had that experience for, nearly a year. So that was important because you never know what it's going to be like to really work with somebody until you do it. And so that kind of risk was off the table. I just knew that I could be friends with my co-founder, but also work with them, and that we work very well together because we have different personalities and kind of complementary skills. But the next step for the business was validation. Teddy and I were fortunate. I had a bunch of contacts that were, chief people officers in the kind of tech and growth stage company world. And Teddy had a lot of network in larger enterprises from his time at LinkedIn. And so we just went on kind of a talking and listening tour where he said, this is a problem. We think these are problems, and we think this isn't a solution, and we think these are the value propositions. What do you think? And we were, emboldened by the feedback we got in that set of conversations to take the next step. So that was step one, was get feedback from the market. And it wasn't 100% of people saying, take my money. But we also understood that, for new technology and new approaches to things, there's a adoption curve. So you don't need 100% of people to say, take my money. You just need to identify the people that you feel like are innovators, or the types of folks that would lean in psychographically to a new concept. And did they, there was 100% agreement on the problem statement. And we saw that the innovators of the group that we talked to were leaning in and saying, like, I would definitely be interested in using this, bringing this into my team, so on and so forth. So that was step one, was just get some validation for what we're doing. And we're not, my co-founder and I are not software engineers. If we were software engineers, step two would have been build a prototype and start to sell it. And, because that's the better version of validation, which is build a prototype and have people actually pay you money. But we're not software engineers. So practically, the next step was, well, we need to figure out a way to build this product, and we need capital to do that because we need to, hire people to, help us build out this product and take it to market. And so we immediately went to, we're going to raise some money, or at least attempt to raise some money and build a team. Just a long story short, we're very fortunate, again, the life lottery to, be in a time and a place and in a country and an environment where, my co-founder and I, with, a reasonably good idea and some validation and a little bit of experience, we're able to get people to, buy in on what we were doing and give us enough capital to start, going and building the company.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Wow. Incredible. So then, like, how many iterations of the product, or the idea for the product, what you wanted to create, from the day you had the idea till now, has it changed?
I'm just smiling because no, not really. I mean, I'd love to be like, yeah, we were building this other thing and then we pivoted and like, well, somebody asked us for our like seed deck a while, it was maybe 4 or 5 months ago, and I hadn't looked at it in a while, and I was like, pretty much, pretty much did exactly what we said we were going to do. It still prove, there still might be pivots in our future or changes, of course, but it's more or less exactly what we said we were going to do. The product is essentially what we thought the product would be. the value propositions are what we thought the value propositions would be. The target customer profile is what we thought the target customer profile would be. So, there's obviously little twists and turns along the way, or big twists and turns in the future potentially. But so far, it's been pretty true to, candidly, what we envision on day one.
So then let me ask you, is that because you always have sort of that North Star, that goal you created in that first seed deck? You built out the ideal customer, you built out, the use case for it. Is that always at the forefront? Do you have like that, hypothetically a massive poster, showing the casing, all that, to know that this is how we have to make sure we stay clear to our core mission?
That's a good question. No, actually, we've definitely gone through cycles where we tried to be very hypothesis driven and, test our core assumptions and we were, try to be pretty neutral about what we should do, whether we should zig or zag at certain periods of time. But, I think, it's probably somewhat attributable to just my co-founder and I have a decent amount of experience in this space, particularly he does. We have a sense for, our buyer and what their, what their pain points are. I sat in like a hiring and talent leader role for a little while. I worked at a company where this is what I studied for a bunch of time. His clients were the heads of talent of the biggest companies in the world for a long time. And so, there was some intuition about, we didn't have to learn a lot of lessons to some degree about who our buyer was and what they cared about and how the process worked and so on and so forth. I mean, we're always learning, but there was context there and intuition, and I don't know, chalk it up to maybe luck, but we just had an idea of how the product should work and why it would be useful if it worked that way, and kind of panned out, along the lines of what we originally envisioned. Now, I mean, sure, there's definitely little differences here and there, and we've learned lessons along the way. There's definitely examples where we kind of said it should work this way, and we built it that way, and we actually had to change the way it was built a little bit to make it work a little bit better, for our customers or the use case. But so far, it hasn't been sort of like a major change in course. That's been like, oh, we should have implemented it this way versus that way. Now let's switch that up because it's going to work better, but not like a wholesale vision change or anything along those lines.
Yeah, I love, you constantly mention, one of the things I'm constantly getting out of our conversation is something that you mentioned multiple times already, the contribution of luck. A lot of times, we fall into our own head saying like, a lot of times ego could come involved saying, I did this, I'm smart enough, therefore I could do it, and I was able to push forward. And you being able to realize that, say, hey, no, yes, I'm smart, yes, I work hard, and I try to become the master of my domain and put in all my effort. But at the end of the day, there's only a certain amount of effort I could put in, and the rest has to be contributed to luck. Right?
Totally. I do not believe in starting successful companies in, a test tube, and you've like control for all the controllables and variables, and you can will it into the world. That's just not the way it works. There's too many variables. Some of them just have to go right for you to be successful. That's just the reality. Certainly, particularly in like technology, where things move very fast, and the competitive environment matters, the buying environment matters, depending on how you build the company, the financing environment matters. So there's tons of luck and timing involved. I mean, there just is. I think I would, kind of dispute anybody that feels strongly that there's no, a strong element of luck in technology entrepreneurship. There's a huge, strong element of luck.
For sure. They say this story about Rothschild. I think one of the Rothschilds, how they're interviewing him once, and they asked, what do you contribute your success to? So he's like, it's 90% luck and 10% in my mind, my head. And he's like, if I'm able to change that 10% for 100% of luck, I'll do it any day. But I love that. And the second thing that comes about from our conversation a lot is humility. The humility that you have, and knowing that the humility you have is incredible, absolutely incredible to work forward. But back to our conversation, there's three pivotal moments of a company. There's obviously the founding day when you started, it's getting that first angel check, and the third thing is always acquiring that first customer. How'd you convince that first customer to take that chance in you? to say, hey, please use Brighthire. I don't know if you had to beg and kiss their feet. I don't know if you had to use some easy, but how'd you get them?
I mean, our first using the first people that used our product were not paying us. We were like, please use this product. Will you consider using this product? Because it was a true prototype. And it was, so initially it was just get a bunch of people, convince them to use our product, warts and all, and then kind of slowly make the product better and better while people are using it, and get to a point where we got to a point where it was like, we feel confident we feel like we're delivering enough value to ask you for money now.
Sure.
Respectfully, given that you took a bunch of risk, starting to use our product when it was not, perfect. It's probably different if you're meeting a company at that point in time and they didn't take that bet on you. I think we would have been a little bit more leaning into, let's just see if we can get them to pay us. But these were the first folks that wrote us checks were people that actually had already paid us. Mm-hmm. They paid us with their time and their feedback and their risk appetite. And they're running a business, so for them to use your software means that they're putting it in the line of fire, basically. And so it's not nothing when somebody's using your early version of a product in their day-to-day, particularly in a business, in a B2B setting. They are paying you already. So, but yeah, it was definitely like the happiest moment so far of the entire, I mean, just I think it's like, just a very unique experience. And probably if you're like a second and third time entrepreneur, feels good, but not quite the same. But the first time you're like, I thought of something in my head, and then it became something, and then somebody actually thought it was worth paying me money for, is definitely a little bit of a special experience.
Wow, that's amazing. I hope you savored that moment for a long time. So flipping the script from there, then, as a first-time founder and CEO of a company that, thank God, is working and going and hopefully going to continue to grow, what were some of the early challenges, and what are some of the mistakes you've made? And
yeah, I mean, there's tons of challenges. I mean, there's challenges all the time. There's no, right. It's not the social network. I mean, I guess there's challenges in the social network, but there's like that whole long montage where everything's working, and they go from like, I don't know, it is, 100,000 users to it's like, 1 billion. And it was like, oh, what happened? That was 2 minutes in the movie. And it just seemed like it worked really well. I'm sure there's a lot of problems. So there's always lots of challenges along the way. There's big ones, there's little ones, there's ones that feel big at the time, but actually are little. Being in other startups, not as a founder, but just as an operator in other startups for a while before starting this company was beneficial in that regard, because, the first time you experience a bunch of mistakes or challenges in that operating environment, they feel like it's the end of the world. And then you kind of deal with them and then realize that actually it's not the end of the world, whether it's, personnel or, product choices or what have you. So, yeah, I mean, there's stuff all the time. I mean, nothing massive comes to mind or that I, you can go down rabbit holes and chase opportunities that you think are the right opportunity. There was a period of time where there was a kind of a segment of the market that we could have made more money faster serving them. And we were kind of focused on that for a little while, a couple months, and kind of had a great conversation with one of our investors. And it was like, yes, we could generate revenue faster if we focused on this segment, but ultimately we believe the big market opportunity is over here, and we are also passionate about that part of the market. And so if there are things that we have to address or questions that we have to resolve or features that we need to build to make that part of the market, as receptive and to what we're doing as this other part of the market, we should actually pull that forward. Like, let's do that work now. We don't want to delay that work. So that was a big one for us, where we just sort of like said, okay, no, we're not going to do that anymore. We're really just going to focus on this other part of the market, despite the fact that, that part of the market, we could probably get to, whatever it was, 1 million ARR really fast, much faster. And that was that was a big, good decision, but one that wasn't so obvious at the time.
Right. Yeah, that's a classic component of like, chasing a shiny object. And it's so easy. Like you're like, I have this, I could get to millionaire so quickly, and then you can whatever it is, acquire more customers, raise more money, hire better, and to make that decision must have been a very tough decision to like turn away from that and say, you know what, we're going to stay clear. We're going to stay close to our actual principles of what we're trying to create over here, our real goal. Wow. So, as what do you? So then, as a first-time founder, culture is obviously the most important part. Remote culture is the whole entire thing. I'm assuming you're remote from the beginning, from day one, or not.
No, we were not remote from day one. So that was a development of, the pandemic. We were in an office in the West Village. We weren't a very big team then. It was three of us, but it was still the three of us, and we were going to the office every day and seeing each other face to face. So we were not remote from day one, and I wasn't necessarily planning to build a remote company. Not that I've always I've always really dreaded commuting. It's never been something that I always, never something that I look forward to. And I did enjoy, working from home in my last role. There was a lot of flexibility, and I would do it, and it was great. I felt like very productive, but it wasn't necessarily the type of company I thought I was going to build, or my co-founder thought we were going to build. But we responded to the situation on the ground and ended up finding some really great people, and it seemed like we could, I think like a lot of other people, we realized, we can actually make this work. And we haven't cracked the code. I don't think I don't think anyone's cracked the code. I mean, there's some big companies that have been built from the ground up remote first, and I think they're amazing sort of North Stars on things that you should do and get right in that kind of environment. But we felt like, in hindsight, scaling my previous company, the fact that we wanted to look for people who were super talented, values aligned, like we were the right fit for them in terms of the growth arc of their career. And then, so the pool is pretty small at that point, if you're looking for like really specialized roles with all of that fit. And then like you add this final filter of, can you get to 245 Fifth Avenue at 9 a.m. Monday through Friday? That just seems kind of crazy in hindsight. It really does. It's like that pool is teeny. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of companies that actually are trying to find the same people. And so removing that final filter is, a transformation in velocity, in terms of how teams can be built. And so, we were not remote first, but we quickly kind of attached to this being something that would be a good fit, and honestly, a good fit in terms of some of the values that we want to support around flexibility and the things we talked about earlier. It's easier to accommodate when people are working from home or working remotely. It's easier for people to have a flexible lifestyle that fits into other things that matter to them, without the rigidity of going in and out at certain times of day and being offline and that sort of thing. So
as a hiring company, then, obviously I'm sure you use your own tool in order to, evaluate for hiring. But, as a hiring company, people are probably looking to you also for the best practices for hiring. And because I'm assuming you're probably gonna hire the best talent. But what is your process for hiring? What are some tips that other companies can implement into their hiring process, in order to attract the best talent, and also not just attract the best talent, which is candidate experience, but also the actual process of the interviewing and everything?
Yeah. I mean, the first step is planning. Really understanding what you're looking for, being super clear and explicit about the skills, traits, et cetera, that are important. And that's really driven off, what does success look like? What are your expectations? If you paint, we paint a version of like, practically, if this person comes into our organization and is here for 6 months, because that's farther enough out where you can kind of really put real projects and things that they would work on in place, but not so far out that you're sort of inventing things that, and you say like, okay, what would this person look like if they came in and they were wildly successful and effective in 6 months? Specifically, what would they do? What projects would they do? How would they lead them, and so on and so forth, and just spelling that out very clearly. And if you do that, that really gives you a very clear sense for what skills or traits or background or things somebody would need to be able to do that effectively. or what things would be, really, really definites, like they must have these things, versus some things that maybe you think that they need to have. So maybe they're nice to have, but maybe somebody could come in and accomplish all those things without that. And then figuring out, okay, from there, how are we going to assess against these things? How are we going to figure out if somebody has these skills, capabilities, traits, values, and spelling them out really, really carefully and really, really clearly. And then having an evaluation criteria at the end to say, how confident are we that these candidates, or this candidate, has all of these things, and with a very, very high probability will be able to, like, these bullets will be the description of what they did in the next 6 months. Like, do we feel 95% confident that, no brainer, this person is going to, execute against these things in the way that we describe them? That helps a lot to find what you're, to find the right talent. It's a forcing function to really be very clear about expectations. And it forces the process to be really, really focused on what matters. Then, of course, we use our own software, and we pull that plan through into the moment, which matters, right? So we are super efficient with the process we put candidates through. We pull those really important things forward, and we're really thoughtful about covering the things that, we want to assess for, and covering them as quickly, upfront as possible, so that we can be efficient about who we progress through the process, both for our own time, but also for a candidate's time. If you have two kind of, open-ended conversations with a candidate, you don't actually get to what the deal breakers are, what you need to know. You're wasting everyone's time. And then we're able to calibrate really quickly, which is super important. People in the hiring process are not pieces of paper and ideas. They're real people. And so, if my co-founder and I are looking for somebody to join our team in a new role that doesn't exist before, we are talking in real time, asynchronously, and sharing actual substance from these candidates and saying, is this the type of experience that we expect for somebody in this role? Is this what you had in mind? What do you think of this? And so it's this continuous, fast calibration process that helps us align really concretely on what great looks like, or what our mutual expectations are, so that we can make sure we're focused, and our assessment makes sense for what we're hoping for. And then ultimately we want to, use evidence to substantiate our decision-making and have a level of accountability in our process. And so we're not hanging on subjective, feedback and fallible memories and those sorts of things to make our hiring decisions. But we're saying, we said these things were important. Here is the demonstration of those things. This is why we think that, this is why I think this person's a great fit. And if you have if you disagree, which definitely happens in the hiring process, we are now collaborating like people collaborate in life, in business, where it's like, okay, well, you show me where you see otherwise. Now let's talk about that, and we resolve it in a real way. So that's kind of our approach. Yeah.
I mean, this is like clear, straight, evidence-based hiring. The time frame is so much quicker. It's based upon real data. Like a lot of times, especially specifically recruiters, where most people think, it's a human condition. We think we're better than we actually are, and then we think we're worse than we actually are, right? And we think a lot of times that our personal judgments, our self-judgment of others, and our EQ towards, assessing other people are much better than the average person out there. And that's the way human condition works. And specifically by HR, where they say, when someone takes a resume, it's like, and they always, proclaim that within 15 seconds, I can decide if someone's the right candidate or not. I mean, that's the biggest BS I've ever heard, in order to assess that. When you're taking evidence-based hiring, saying, hey, we're going to use data. Let's take real data. Was this said during the conversation? Was this not said during the conversation? Is this the data? Does this person have the ability to do this job? Not have to do? Is it going to be a culture add? And all these types of things is absolutely incredible, amazing. And the problem is, I think, I'd love to hear your thoughts about this, is that we're trying to provide technology, which technology is going to be the game changer, how people get hired, but we're trying to provide technology for an industry that is sort of people that are still in the 20th century type of thing, 21st century technology for people that are still trying to figure the process out and everything.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think our platform is empowering for the folks on the talent acquisition side, because ultimately, they have to apply judgment in that way, because they also are evaluated on, they don't want to send people down through the process that ultimately aren't going to be, perceived as the right fit by the hiring manager, hiring team. And they've spent their time with somebody that may not be the right fit, but there's no in between. It's either I'm sending somebody along and I need to be really, really confident that they're going to be worth the team's time, because I don't want them to feel like I'm wasting their time, or, I don't pass them along. But now we enable them to not make that trade-off, and to give people an opportunity that may not be, from, central casting, to the T, but actually demonstrate that they have some really interesting qualities, so that we can open up the different, non-traditional backgrounds. And also so that it's not like a very inefficient game of telephone, because everyone has their own preference and they're not always great at articulating what they're looking for. So that's a very challenging thing for a talent acquisition team, particularly around a new role or new hiring managers they're working with, is like, I'm sending people your way. I'm not getting a lot of substantive feedback back about why yes or no. So how can we actually align on what we're looking for in an efficient manner, right? Where we're able to hire faster and get the right person in seat because we're on the same page. And so by bringing information symmetry to the equation, we want to, really make that much easier, much more fluid, and much faster. Because now we're collaborating on something real,
Right.
not just like kind of playing games of telephone back and forth.
Yeah.
And as it pertains to technology, I mean, there's a lot of opportunity to improve the way the process works with technology, and part of it's enabled by, changes to the working world, right? The fact that we're having this conversation in a mode that can be captured and turned into data and collaborated on, is beneficial, and it unlocks a lot of other opportunities. So
Yeah, we should run this conversation through your software afterwards and see what it comes out.
we certainly could do that.
So then tell me, first time, what's your message to other founders? You were experiencing this incredible journey. Look at the testament that, the investor belief in you, customer belief in you, the fact that your employee belief in you. You're obviously doing something right. And I'm sure it came along with a lot of mistakes also, but you're doing something right. What's your message to the other founders that are either currently in the journey or debating to start the journey?
I don't like giving maxims, because I feel like, it's like every situation is so different. Every person is different. Every opportunity is different. I would say, generally speaking, entrepreneurship is pretty challenging. And it's a definite lifestyle choice. So what that challenge means to you will be shaped based on, what you're looking for. So you have to really be eyes open and understand what you're getting yourself into, and what the journey is going to be like. And there are people like me where it's a lot of work and so forth, but I really enjoy it. I mean, I get up out of every bed and I'm like, I want to do what I'm doing that day. There's no day where I'm like dreading the meetings on my calendar. It's never happened. So as long as you can view it that way, truly like ups and downs, that's important. It's just important to really understand what the experience is going to be like, and and that there is really highs and highs and very low, very high highs and very low lows, and you need to sort of be able to, roll with it, and get beyond it. So I would say, and then the second piece is that is much easier if you care about the problems that you are solving. It's just much easier to deal with those ups and downs if you're passionate about the problem, you think it matters to you or matters to the world, and you're excited to solve it.
Right.
And then also you're excited to work with the people that you work with. Like, who you work with is really important. You spend a lot of time with them. So, if those are great relationships and people that you care about and you enjoy spending time with, it also makes the process, so much more enjoyable.
Wow, incredible. So then flipping the script from there, what message would you tell yourself? You have the opportunity, you're just graduating college, you're facing the world, you could go into the snowmobile business, snow blowing business, and start a whole entire thing of mowing lawns and plowing garages, or you can continue staying and doing research at Gartner or or the other companies, or you could take this whole entrepreneurship journey, or you could just be a barista in Montclair at the local Starbucks over there. What message would you tell?
What is the age? What is my age that I'm giving myself feedback on? You're saying I'm graduating college?
Graduate college, you have the whole world in front of you right now. So you're
Yeah,
21,
yeah.
22.
I would give myself no advice. Serious. I would not give myself any advice, because, every decision I, made along the way, every mistake, led to what I'm doing now. And I'm very, very happy with what I'm doing now. And so I don't know, it's sort of like Back to the Future too. You don't want to go back and change the future, and then we're Back to the Future one, I guess, the same plot, but you don't want to go back and change the outcome in some way. So I don't think I would have any advice for myself. I would have just done all the stuff that I did, mistakes, whatever, because I'm, very fortunate to be able to do what I'm doing right now, and I wouldn't change it.
Amazing. I love it. And I totally agree with you. We are the person we are today is because of all the collective decisions we made ever since we're a little kid growing up until now. It's not like, you showed up today as the CEO of Brighthire and you are who you are today. No, you are who you are because of, you worked for the startups previously 4 years. You are who you are today because you tried to launch another company and that didn't work out. You are who you are today because of Cornell. You are today because of all the other decisions you made throughout your life. Is who you are, an incredibly man you are today. And going for full circle, listening to this, and listening to your conversation, our conversation today, you're able to see how, growing up, you were able to realize the ability of how much luck plays into it, and how much you want to create value for other types of people, and how much you want to live in a world that, that it's all about people first, because essentially companies are people first, and the world, humanity in general, is all about when people get along together and contribute together to the bigger society. And you see that in the company who you created, and we see that who the man you are today. So Ben, I've learned a tremendous amount. I know I could talk to you for a bunch of more hours, not even a question. We have stuff like we didn't even touch upon, like how'd you get Adam Grant to become an investor in your company, an advisor, and how you go about your day-to-day. So many different things, but I thank you so much for this opportunity. There's no doubt in my mind. I hope that you don't forget me when you're on the NASDAQ, taking Brighthire public. But thank you for the opportunity, and so many people are going to benefit from listening to this conversation and learning from you. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. This is fun. I appreciate the opportunity, and I hope it was interesting to, and hopefully helpful to other folks who are considering doing the entrepreneurship journey.
It was.